It was in the mid-1990s that two people would cross paths, fall in love, and then follow a road that would change the course of their lives forever. The kind of high school sweetheart story you expect to resolve into family photos and long summers and a house full of noisy kids. Not headlines and police affidavits and a courtroom packed with heartbreak. And of course we're talking about James Tolliver Craig and Angela Dawn Prey, and about the marriage that began in the warmth of faith and family, but ended decades later with a fatal dose of poison and a jury's verdict that echoed across Colorado. Welcome to Dark Matters TV, where we don't just recount crimes, we remember lives. Today, we step into the story of Angela Dawn Prey Craig, a woman born of love, a mother of 6, a daughter, a sister, a voice in her church choir, whose life was stolen in the most unthinkable way. Not by a stranger in the dark, but by the person who vowed to protect her. Here, we move carefully, layer by layer, through the heartbreak, the betrayal, and the questions that still leave families and communities aching. Because behind every headline is a name, behind every trial is a family, and behind every crime is a life that mattered deeply. If you're searching for more than just the facts, if you believe that remembering Angela's name keeps her light alive, and that telling her story gives meaning to her loss, then you are exactly where you need to be. We tell these stories with reverence, with empathy, and with a promise that Angela's life, and lives like hers, will never fade into silence. If you're here with me, take a moment to hit that subscribe button, share this memory, and leave a word in the comments below. Your small act helps us keep stories like Angela's alive, and it gives us strength to keep telling the ones that still need to be heard. Angela Dawn Prey was born on April 15, 1979, in Dodge City, Kansas, one of 10 children in a close-knit, deeply rooted family, a daughter who sang, served, and loved with ease, who would later become a mother of 6 and a harmonizing voice in her church choir. The kind of person friends describe as dependable and kind, the steady center of a small universe she cherished. She married her high school sweetheart, James, on December 18, 1999, and in the years that followed their life, at least from the outside, looked like the promised script: a growing family, a husband building a dental practice, a wife creating a home and community, a shared faith that wound through everything. James, born in 1978, presented as bright and ambitious, the kind of person who friends said could sell you on a vision, and for a long time that vision was simple: build a practice, love my wife, raise our kids, show up on Sundays, be the couple people counted on. And for years that's largely what the world saw, at church gatherings, at youth sports, at the dental office where patients came and went and left with cleanings and cavity fillings, and the usual prescriptions for toothpaste and floss, and better habits. But time has a way of revealing the currents running under the surface, and the currents in this marriage were not simple, and by the early 2020s, money was tight, the business was strained, and at least some of the intimacy and trust that kept their early years afloat was taking on water. According to later court records and reporting, the practice was sold to a partner in 2022 as finances faltered, and the marriage itself was under stress that would snap in devastating ways. When relationships fracture, it almost never happens in a single moment. There's a layering of secrets, a thinning of honesty, a slow burn of pressure, and over time that's what was happening here. Court filings and trial coverage later described financial problems and the presence of other women in James's orbit, allegations of pornography issues and compulsive behaviors, and a pattern of deception that, in hindsight, reads like kindling laid down ahead of a match. None of that excuses a crime or proves one on its own, but it does map the landscape into which the events of March 2023 landed, and it helps explain why, when Angela got sick, some people around them noticed that something felt wrong. By early March 2023, according to investigators, James was searching for, pricing, and purchasing substances that have no place in a home kitchen, much less a dental office, and he was also nurturing an out-of-state relationship that suggested he was planning for a life beyond the one he had. That fragile balance, between a public image and a private collapse, would snap the moment Angela's headaches and dizziness sent her to the hospital the first time. On March 6th, Angela felt faint and dizzy after a morning workout. James had made her a pre-workout protein shake, a detail that would become crucial, and when her symptoms spiked, she went to Parker Adventist Hospital. She was treated and released. Over the next days, the symptoms returned: nausea, weakness, headaches, confusion. So on March 9th, she was admitted again. Doctors searched for a cause and found none, and on March 14th, she went home, still fragile but without a diagnosis. Behind the scenes, the dental office where James worked was seeing things that did not make sense. An office manager later told detectives that on March 6th, the same day Angela first fell ill, James stayed late, sitting in a dark exam room working on a computer he didn't ordinarily use. That night, a message went out to staff. A personal package would be arriving. Please don't open it. When the package arrived on March 13th, it was accidentally opened, and inside was a canister with a biohazard sticker and the words potassium cyanide, a substance with no legitimate use in routine dental practice, a fact James's partner, also a dentist, understood immediately. 2 days later, March 15th, Angela's condition crashed. She presented to University Hospital around 11 a.m. with a severe headache and dizziness, and shortly after 2 p.m. she suffered a seizure. Doctors struggled to intubate. Her pupils were unresponsive, intracranial pressure rose, and she was moved to intensive care, placed on life support, her prognosis poor. It was in the chaotic margins of those hours that the dentist partner quietly told a nurse his fear. That Angela had been poisoned, that James had recently ordered cyanide, and that none of it made sense medically. The nurse, as a mandatory reporter, called police, and the homicide unit took over. Behind the image of a family man, James Craig was restless, chasing multiple women and nursing secret affairs. But instead of facing divorce, instead of untangling the life they had built, James chose a darker path. He searched for poisons, ordered cyanide, and quietly began weaving a story that Angela was fragile, even suicidal, hoping her death would look like tragedy rather than murder. In the end, his motive was simple but devastating. He wanted freedom, and he believed the only way to have it was to erase the woman who loved him most. That this is heartbreaking, how people we love fall out of love, and still make a sole decision on how what we started together ends. I hope you already hit the subscribe button. This helps us shade more light on stories like this. Detectives moved fast, not out of haste, but because when someone is on life support and the suspected weapon is a molecule, time matters. Search warrants went out, devices were seized, and a digital timeline began to take shape. According to the affidavit, the evidence would show online searches about arsenic and cyanide, discussions about whether certain poisons were detectable in autopsy, orders placed under pretexts tied to dental surgery, and the arrival of a cyanide shipment that staff inadvertently discovered. Alongside cyanide, toxicology and testimony later highlighted tetrahydrozoline, the active chemical in some over-the-counter eye drops, as present in Angela's system, a compound with dangerous systemic effects when ingested and emphatically not a harmless household product when swallowed. The affidavit captures an exchange almost too stark to believe. When confronted by his business partner about the package, James initially claimed it was a ring for Angela. When that story failed, he allegedly admitted it contained cyanide, but said Angela had asked him to order it, that she couldn't acquire it herself, that it was something like a grim game of chicken. Investigators would later characterize that explanation as part of a broader attempt to make Angela's decline look self-inflicted, a narrative that included rumors about suicidal ideation and attempts to block or shape what would happen after she died. On March 18th, after 3 harrowing days in intensive care, Angela died. She was 43. Toxicology results would later report lethal cyanide levels and the presence of tetrahydrozoline. Prosecutors would argue the fatal dose was administered while she was already hospitalized and at her most vulnerable, a claim backed by blood draw timing evidence presented at trial. That possibility, that the decisive act came not in the kitchen but at the bedside, left even seasoned observers shaken. In the early hours after Angela's death, as detectives collected testimony and staff relayed the cyanide package discovery, the case reached a tipping point. On March 19, 2023, Aurora police arrested James Tolliver Craig on suspicion of first-degree murder, and the narrative he offered, of a wife asking for cyanide, of misinterpreted searches, of coincidences stacked like dominoes, would be tested in the months to come. The charges came into focus. First-degree murder after deliberation, and as the pretrial months unfolded, additional allegations of tampering and solicitation would appear, painting a wider picture of what prosecutors framed as a determined effort to mask homicide as suicide and to obstruct the investigation from jail. It would take more than 2 years for a jury to weigh all of it. Trials are where claims become findings, where theories undergo cross-examination, and where the words beyond a reasonable doubt carry the full weight of our system. In July 2025, the murder trial of James Craig began. On one side, prosecutors threading physical evidence, digital footprints, and witness accounts into a story of intent. A man who searched for poisons, acquired them, used them, and then, after his wife died, sought to fabricate a world in which she had chosen death. On the other, a defense suggesting bias, gaps in testing, the possibility, however remote, that Angela had taken the substances herself, pointing to old journal entries and marital strife as alternative context. Medical experts testified that Angela had nearly twice the lethal level of cyanide, and that based on draw times and lab results the fatal dose was likely administered while she was in the hospital, not days earlier, a detail that prosecutors argued connected the timeline to moments when James was alone with her. Additional evidence referenced tetrahydrozoline exposure, aligning with an autopsy finding and with investigative theories about earlier dosing through drinks. The defense pressed on reliability and contamination possibilities, but as the days unfolded, the weight of the state's case grew heavier. Then came testimony about a separate but related thread. The attempts, prosecutors said, to rewrite the story after the fact. Jurors heard about jailhouse solicitations, an alleged offer to pay an inmate to kill the lead detective, a scheme to plant letters and fabricate evidence that would suggest Angela was suicidal. Even instructions, according to testimony, pushing a family member to help generate a deepfake video to bolster that narrative. Those episodes did not just shock, they acted like glue, prosecutors argued, sticking intent and consciousness of guilt to everything else. If meticulous timelines and respectful storytelling are your thing, this is a good moment to tap subscribe. Helps more people find victim-centered coverage like this. Back to court. On July 30th, 2025, after deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder for the cyanide killing of Angela Craig, as well as guilty on multiple solicitation counts linked to tampering and perjury schemes. In Colorado, the sentence for first-degree murder is life without the possibility of parole, and the judge imposed exactly that, the rest of James Craig's life behind bars. The district attorney's office and news outlets reported the outcome plainly, and in the courtroom the finality of it seemed to land like a stone in deep water, ripples expanding through two families and a community that had already endured so much. It's easy, with a case like this, to let the chemistry and the courtroom dominate the frame. The searches, the shipments, the blood draws, the legal theater. But at the center is a person, and people who loved her. Angela was a daughter and a sister, a wife and a mother of 6, a friend and a choir director at church, a woman whose obituary reads like a ledger of service and affection, a life defined by laughter around a dinner table and rides to practice and hymns sung on slender Sunday mornings. She did not seek this story. This story happened to her. And the way we honor her now is by speaking her name, by remembering her birthday, April 15th, 1979, by noticing the goodness she poured into her world. What remains are 6 children rebuilding a life that exploded, extended families who must carry the weight of both love and loss, a congregation arranging casseroles and college funds and carpool schedules, and a cautionary tale about how deceit metastasizes, how the small betrayals of character can, if unchecked, spiral into harm no one around you ever imagined you capable of, and how institutions, hospitals, offices, courts, depend on ordinary people noticing and speaking up when something doesn't look right. Here, a nurse listened when a colleague whispered a concern and then did her duty. A business partner paid attention to a label and trusted his instincts. Office staff documented what they'd seen rather than rationalize it. And detectives connected the dots with quiet urgency. And in a world where crimes like poisoning are rare but devastating, those steps mattered. Justice can't return a mother to her children or rewind a life, but it can name what happened and set a boundary against it. And in that sense, the verdict and the life sentence are both declaration and line in the sand. That Angela was killed, that the instrument was poison, that her killer was her husband, and that the community will not be gaslit into believing otherwise. And there's something to be learned from the steadfastness of the people who refused to look away, from the office manager, who opened a box and then told the truth, from the partner who quietly told a nurse his fear, from medical staff who let suspicion rise to the surface, and from detectives who followed every breadcrumb to the end of the trail. If you or someone you know is feeling unsafe at home, please reach out to local resources or national hotlines in your country. Tell someone you trust, document what you can, and remember that you deserve to be believed and protected. If you found this story valuable and you want more careful victim-first reporting, tap that subscribe button, It helps this community grow, and it helps keep stories like Angela's centered where they belong. And until next time, stay safe and stay aware.